My poker career began with a question. Why can't I? After depositing $200 and going broke for the 10th time, I won a $10 tournament for $3,000. Within a month, I had won $40,000. I dropped out of school and soon after was playing a $10,000 tournament in the Bahamas. Over 5 years, I had cash for over $1.2 million. 7 years later, I was faced with a decision. Continue to crush poker and study under one of the best in the game, or go see about a girl. A lot of people may think I was crazy for not continuing to study under Fedor, but after finding some financial success early in my career, I realized that while money is important, finding someone you click with on so many different levels is so much more rare. I don't regret my decision for a second, but I often wonder about that part of myself I left behind. 17 years later, the question I ask myself now is how can I? With everything going on in my life, how can I get back into the game that I love? Typically, our dreams never evolve because we don't have the time or money. I know that if I don't do this now, I'll wake up in 10 years wishing I did. So let's get back to the basics. After the incredible feedback from my first video, I am pumped to play this second session. We've got our $300 and a seat opens up for 1-2. We folded for a couple orbits. It seems like this table is a pretty good mixture of recreational players, and then it does definitely have a few people that seem like regs. So I'm going to be trying to play my pots selectively and see if we can get in some pots with some recreational players. The first hand we play of this session, the straddle's on for 5, under the gun makes the limp, and we look down at Queen Jack offsuit. This is definitely a good enough hand to isolate here. He's not going to have our Queen or Jack out kicked very often, and I've seen him limp a lot of hands, so let's try to punish him. We're going to raise it up to 22. Folds around to the big blind who makes the call, straddler folds, under the gun limp makes the call, and we go 3 ways to a flop. Flop comes down King Queen 3 with a flush draw, and they both check to us. We've got second pair with the backdoor straight draw. Our hand is fairly strong, but we can't really withstand any pressure, so we're going to check this one behind and try to get to a showdown. I think we can let one roll off safely. Turn comes a 7 of clubs, bringing a backdoor flush draw with it. Big blind checks, and under the gun bets 25. Our hand is too good to fold at this point. I don't see any reason for raising, so we're going to make the call. Big blind gets out of the way, and we're going to this river heads up. The Queen of clubs brings in the backdoor flush while also giving us trips, and our opponent leads into us for 35. When he picks the small size on the river, I definitely think we're good, so we're going to want to get some additional value here. However, we can't get too much more because that backdoor flush is going to scare him. We put in the raise to 85, and immediately he voices his disgust. He's pretty sure we have a flush, but he makes the call anyway. We show him the Queen Jack, and we've got him out kicked. He's got Queen 4 of hearts. We played at this table for about an hour, and we really didn't get any spots. I didn't like the table all that much and thought that one of the other tables would probably be better, so I asked for a table change. I get seated in a 3-seat to what seems like a friendly table. Everybody's talking, having a good time. That's the kind of table I want to be at. We look down at Jack 8 of spades and the low jack and decide to open it up for 10. The cutoff calls, button calls, small blind calls, and the big blind folds. So we're going 4 ways to a flop. Flop comes down King, Jack, Ace, and it checks to us. This is a great board if you want a triple barrel bluff, because we do have a very strong range on a board like this. However, being 1-2 and having 4 opponents, I don't think this is a spot that I want to start shoveling money into this pot, because I think there's a good chance that we're behind right now. We start off with a check, and the cutoff bets 10. Folds back around to us, and at this point, I think there's a chance we actually have the best hand versus this guy in particular, because he's been limping some trash. So we're just going to call. Well, let's see a turn. It's cheap enough, and we do have that backdoor flush draw, as well as we've got a pair. Turn is the 7 of spades, which brings in that backdoor flush draw. I'd like to see a cheaper free river, so we're going to check and hope that he checks behind. He doesn't and puts out another small bet of 20 this time. Now at this point, I considered jamming because he only had about $90 behind, but I just decided to make the call, taking a little bit of a safer route here. River is about as good as it gets, the 4 of spades completing that backdoor flush. I think there's a good chance he checks behind because of the weak bets he's been making, so we just jam into him. He doesn't think too long before folding, and we win a decent little pot. It's not long before we pick up another playable hand. The straddle's on, under the gun limps for 5, and the hijack makes it 30. The hijack's raise size is quite large, and in the moment, it just kind of screamed a hand like 10s or jacks, some vulnerable hand that just doesn't want to see a flop because they know their overcard's coming, and they just want to win it right now. We're on the button, we look down at king-queen suited. This is a very playable hand post-flop. It does decent multi-ways, so for a lot of reasons, we're going to make this call. Everybody ends up folding, and we're going heads up to a flop. Flop comes down ace 5-3 with 1 heart. There's not much going on here for us. We've got a backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw, and we do have the best no pair hand, which can be useful in some situations. Our opponent continues with a small bet of 20, and this bet's too small to get us off of our hand quite yet. We're going to make the call. Turns a 6 of spades, it's no help to us, and he checks over to us pretty quickly. At this point, I think my initial read is probably right, something like 10s or jacks. He could also have a hand like ace-jack or ace-10, or even ace-queen that he's just deciding to play a little passively and cautiously. However, that's not going to stop us. We're going to load up the clip and put out a bet of 40. He makes the quick call, and I immediately start thinking about what size is going to make him a believer on the river.
River's the 9 of spades, which brings in the backdoor flush, and he checks to us.
This card doesn't improve our hand, but it does help us in the sense that he's going to have one more thing to think about when he stares down our $85 bet. Seems like he had already made up his mind as his cards go into the muck before my chips hit the felt. Definitely feels good to get a river bluff through and be rewarded with a nice pot. After a little while, we move over to the 2-seat because I felt like it was a better angle to catch the table action. It doesn't take long for us to get involved in a pot. Under the gun limps, we look down at queen 9 of diamonds. This is kind of a speculative hand, but we're feeling good, so let's raise it up. We make it 12. Cutoff makes the call, under the gun +1 makes the call, and we're going 3 ways to a flop. Flop comes down king 6-4 with 1 diamond, and it checks to us. This is a great board for us to be repping. We're going to have a lot of kings in our range. The opponents are not going to have many kings in their ranges. Plus, there's 1 diamond on the board, which I'm told in 2024 this is now called a flush draw, so we're going to lead out for 15. The cutoff clicks it back, and it folds back around to us. Now, I've got some reads on this opponent, and I don't think he's very strong at this point. We've got a backdoor draw, our queen and 9 pair might be good, so we're going to make the call. The deuce of hearts kills our dreams of a backdoor flush, and doesn't change much as far as the board goes. It does make a straight possible, but we did raise pre-flop, so I don't suspect that he has 3-5. We check it over to him, and he leads out for a very small bet of 25, and something just does not feel right. I think it over for about 30 seconds before finally letting this one go. The dealer ships him the pot, and he's nice enough to show us his hand. Take a look at what he's got. I don't know if this is just a New England thing, but I have no idea why this hand is called the slingshot. If anyone knows, please leave it in the comments below, because I would love to know. Folds to us on the button. We've got king 9 offsuit. I think it's definitely a good enough hand to open, especially with the player that's in the big blind, who plays pretty much any 2 cards. As expected, he makes the call, and we go heads up to a flop. Flop comes queen 5-5, and he checks it over to us. He's not going to connect with this flop very often, and I think a c-bet is going to take this down the majority of the time, so we lead out for 10. He doesn't think long before calling, and we're going off to a turn. Turns the king of diamonds, and he checks again. Now, instead of bluffing, we're trying to get value out of him. Plus, we have a backup 9 of diamonds flush draw, so we're going to continue the aggression here and lead out for a bet of 15. He makes the call pretty quickly, and at this point, he may actually have a queen, so we can get a little bit of value from him on the river as well. River's a deuce of hearts, and he continues to be passive with a check, so we're going to go for thin value with a bet of 20.
He makes the call, and we confidently turn over our king 9, and we slowly begin to realize that this is not what it seems. We just took ourselves to Value Town for 3 straight streets. And what is it with this hand, and why can't I get away from it? Under the gun, we pick up pocket 8s, and we come in for a standard raise of 10. Under the gun +1 makes the call, small blind makes the call, and we go 3 ways to a flop. Flop comes queen 5, and the small blind checks to us. It's a decent board for 8s. It's less likely that someone has a queen when there's 2 on the board, and because there are a lot of overcards to our 8s, we want to fold out that equity. So we make a bet of 15. Guy to our left makes the fold, and the small blind thinks about it for a while and makes the call. It's a little concerning because there's no draws out there. He could have a 5, he could have a smaller pair than our 8s. He can also have a queen, so we got to be a little bit careful here. Turn is the 6 of diamonds, and he checks to us. I do like betting on this turn, and the reason being is we can still get value from hands that we're beating, and also he could have called on the flop with a hand like King Jack that he just didn't believe us. So we'd rather fold out that equity than give him a free river card. If he does call, we can check behind on the river and get to a showdown. So we fire out a bet of 25. Our opponent makes the call, and I am not planning on putting any more money into this pot. River's the deuce of diamonds, and he fairly quickly decides to lead out with a bet of $30. I got to applaud him for his bet size. He made it very difficult to fold. I only have to be right 1 out of 6 times for this to break even, so good job, Mark. You got me here. We make the call, and he shows us what we expected to see. On to the next one. Still shaking off that last hand. Under the gun limps, low jack limps. We're in the cutoff, and we look down at pocket 5s. Speaking of pocket 5s, I really miss you guys. That off-topic form was pretty good. Anyway, we're going to think positively and imagine a 5 on the flop, so we're going to raise this up to 15. Button, small blind, under the gun, and the low jack all make the call. We're going 5 ways to a flop. That's an omen. I'm seeing a lot of 5s here. Flop comes King 6-4 with 2 diamonds, and it pretty quickly gets checked over to us. A lot of the hands that I played during this 8-hour session went a lot like this. Raise pre-flop, get 3 or 4 callers, and then completely whiff the flop. I don't think betting into 4 people with pocket 5s on this board is a good idea, but I'm sure someone in the comments will tell me that it is. Anyway, we decide to check, and the button checks behind. We're going off to a free turn. Turn is the 3 of spades, and we pick up an open-ended straight draw. Slingshot, who's been playing a lot of pots, leads out for a small bet of 25. It folds to us, and even though this is not a board that I would ever really slow play with 4 other players in the pot, I'm going to try to make a believer out of him anyway. I raise to 75. Button folds, and he doesn't think too long about putting in the chips for the call. I guess he's got my number. The river is the deuce of hearts, and we make our straight. It was at this moment that I remember that I can get lucky too, especially when he leads out with a bet of 75. We've got the effective nuts because we blocked 2 5s, so it's very hard for him to have ace-5 or 5-7 or any other 5 for that matter. There's only one thing left to do here. He takes about 30 seconds and finally makes the fold. He shows us the 6 of clubs. He wants to see one, but we don't have a good one to show him. We tell him,
"You'll see it on TV."
After that nice pot, it feels like we're finally getting a little bit of traction. We pick up a suited Broadway hand under the gun. Definitely going to come in for a raise. We make it our standard 10. Folds around to the small blind, who makes the call. Big blind comes along for the ride as well, and we're going 3 ways to a flop. Flop comes 5, 8, 9 with 2 hearts, and both players check to us. We do have a gutter ball plus 2 overcards, so I think we have decent equity in this hand. However, both blinds are a lot more likely to have a hand like 6, 7, 8, 9. The only types of hands that I'm going to have a very strong hand on this board are pocket 5s, pocket 8s, and pocket 9s. Maybe ace-high flush draws, 10 jack, things like that. So really the amount of made hands that I can really have on this board is very low. So for that reason, I decided to play it cautiously and check behind. The poker gods reward me, and they give me the gin turn card of the Jack of Clubs. It puts a second flush draw out there, but it gives us the nut straight. There's no hand that can beat us now at this point in time. I'm not so excited when both players check to us. We missed a bet on the flop, so we're going to try to get as much money in as we can by the river. We're going to go for a full pot size bet. Small blind thinks for a little while, and it seems that he actually thought about raising for a moment, but he decides to make the call. Big blind folds, and it's just me and the small blind going to this river. River is the 8 of diamonds. It pairs the board. We no longer have the nuts, but we're still pretty comfortable with our queen high straight. It's a little bit of a cause for concern when he leads out $50 into us. I think our hand is just too strong not to raise. He could be leading with 6-7, 10-7, a hand like ace-8, really any 8 for that matter, especially because the 8 of hearts is out there, and he could have a busted flush draw with that 8, giving him trips, which we beat. We go for value and raise it up to 150. He responds with,
All in. I said.
He shoves all in for 475, and at this point, I know he's got me beat, but the problem is I wasn't sure if he was going to overplay a hand like 6-7 or 10-7, so I was trying to decide if he actually had a straight, and maybe I had him beat, but I decided to take this opportunity to make up for my mistakes of last episode and try to get as much information from my opponent as possible here. I turn over my cards and start asking him questions.
What do you got? Look straight.
See it on TV.
Do you want me to call? I kind of believe you.
Eventually, I put all the pieces together and asked the dealer to muck my hand. Our opponent was nice enough to show his hand and give us confirmation that we made the right fold. It's never fun to lose a big pot, but it is very satisfying to get put to the test and make the right decision in a big spot. So thanks again, Mark, for showing me your hand and giving me that satisfaction. This hand we're in the big blind, under the gun limps, cut off limps, small blind completes, and we look down at the Mighty Ducks. I'd be pretty sad if I hit a set and there was only $8 in the pot, so we're going to raise it up to 17. Under the gun calls, cut off folds, small blind calls, so we're going 3 ways to this flop. Flop comes 10-7-5 rainbow, and the small blind leads out for 6. Under the gun acts out a turn with a call, and now I can complete the action with a call as well, and I'm getting over 10-1. I'm going to see one more card and make the call. Turn is the 9 of hearts and we don't get there, and the small blind leads out for 10. I'm done chasing my 2 outs, and I get out of the way. Under the gun makes the call, and they go heads up to a river. Let's look at it together. But wait, there's more. That's right, the small blind called a $17 raise with 10-4 offsuit. I don't know him that well, but maybe he's a truck driver and it's his favorite hand. Getting on to this next hand, under the gun limps in, we're in the cutoff, and we look down at Queen-Jack offsuit. I think this is a worthy candidate of a raise, so we come in for 12. Button folds and slingshot makes it 26 to go. Now this raise size I didn't think was that strong, but he's done some weird things tonight, and I really can't fold getting the price that I'm getting. I expect this money is probably going in on the flop or at some point in the remainder of this hand, so we're going to make the call for 14 more and see a flop. Flop comes Queen 9 deuce all hearts. He checks his cards, doesn't think about it for too long before shipping in his last 100. I'm not in love with this spot because if he's got one overcard plus a heart, he's about a 50% favorite to win. But getting the price we're getting, given the action, I think we're probably ahead now and we've got to make the call. Dealer runs out the board. He shows us his ace deuce for 2 pair that he caught on the turn, and we show a queen before mucking our hand. We reload for another 100 with the hopes of getting back what we just lost. It's getting late. A couple players took a walk, so we're down to 5-handed for this hand, and under the gun comes in for a raise of 15. We look down at King-Jack and decide this is a pretty good 3-bet spot. This guy's been playing a lot of pots, so we decide to play back at him with a raise to 40. Gets back to him and he pretty quickly makes it 100. So now we can either shove or fold, and I take the more conservative route. I'm not going to put all my stack in here. I didn't play for the last 6 hours to lose all my money with Jack-King off. I guess there might be other ways to play this hand, but I felt in this moment this was the right play. Next hand, we're in the big blind, the straddle's on. We get 3 callers to us. We look down at 7-9 offsuit. It's not the best hand, but it is connected, and we're getting great pot odds. We're going to complete because it's a family pot, and we'd be breaking one of the cardinal rules of 1-2 if we folded. Straddler checks, and we go 5 ways to a flop of Queen 8-6 with 2 spades. Small blind comes out of the gate with a bet of 7. With a flush draw on board, I don't want to get too crazy just yet. We're just going to call the 7 and see what everyone else does. Surprisingly, for such a small bet, it folds around and we're going heads up to a turn. Turn is the 8 of spades, and our opponent checks to us. We now have a flush draw to go with our open-end straight draw, but the 8 is a great card for us to bet because we just called on the flop and it was a very small bet to call, so it's very likely that we could have an 8. We want to take the lead in this hand, so we fire out 20. Small blind makes the call and we're going to see a river. Dealer turns over the 3 of diamonds. At this point, there's no way for us to win unless we bet, and he wants to start a conversation.
I like the brick.
Do you like it?
Didn't help you.
No, it didn't. 35.
Our bet gets through and we do a little advertising. I'll be honest, I felt a little pressured to win this one.
What, bet raise.
Dude, I tried to aspire to be that fucking place.
All right.
Just don't take our
Who are
money.
you rooting for right now? Huh? Kevin or me?
You, but Kevin got this. Shit, you
Kevin.
No.
Just fold and then you don't have to worry about it.
Low jack, high jack, and cut off all limp, and we're in the small blind with ace queen offsuit. We're going to size up a little bit. We don't want 3 callers, so we make it 18. We get 2 folds and a call from Mark. The flop comes Jack 10-8 rainbow. It's a pretty good flop for our hand. We've got 2 overcards, we've got a double gut shot straight draw, but his limping range is going to hit this better than our raising range. For that reason, we're going to start with a check, and we're okay to call a bet here. He checks behind, and the turn brings the 5 of hearts. This card doesn't really change anything, and for the same reasons that we checked on the flop, we're going to check this card as well. He fires out a bet of 20, and that's small enough that we can call. We're getting decent odds. We're still figured to have a decent amount of outs if we are behind, and we could have the best hand as well. River is the deuce of hearts, bringing in the backdoor flush. Not a great card for us to see in case he was betting a flush draw, so if he does bet this card, I'm likely to let it go, but we're going to see what happens. He decides to slow it down and check behind, and he shows us ace-4. We're going to scoop this pot. This hand, we're still playing six-handed. We've got the button, and we see the hijack limp. We look down at 7-8 of diamonds, and this is a good enough hand to open. There's a few reasons why we would want to raise this hand instead of just limp behind. One reason is to fold out hands that have us out kicked like king 8 off and king 7 off that we could most likely run into from the blinds. By raising, we get them to fold those better hands. The second reason is it allows us to take the betting lead, so now we can represent stronger hands on the flop than if we were to just limp behind. Now our range is what's called capped, which means we're not going to have the top tier strength of hands because we would never limp those in behind another limper pre-flop. And the third reason is a very basic fundamental reason. It builds the pot in position. We always want to be playing bigger pots in position because we get to see what all of our opponents do before we have to act. Poker is a game of information, and the more information that you have, the more advantage you have. We raise it up to 12, small blind, big blind, and hijack all make the call. We've got a great hand for a multi-way pot, so let's see what this flop brings. Flop comes 10-8-5 with 2 diamonds. This is a great flop for us. We've got a pair and a flush draw. There's not really many hands that we're going to be that far behind, plus we block a set, so this is a great start. I also love seeing the small blind lead out for 20 and the big blind calling because this sets up a perfect raising spot. Here's why I think raising here is better than just calling. By raising, we can still represent that we've got a big hand. It doesn't cap our range. We can still have aces, kings, pocket 10s, pocket 8s, pocket 5s, all those really great hands, and we don't want to eliminate those from our range. By raising, we can also fold out a better hand than ours, so a hand that's vulnerable like 9-10, Jack-10, Queen-10, those may fold to a raise. The other reason is there are a few straight draws out there as well as a flush draw, and if someone else has a flush draw, we've got a pair and we block 2 diamonds, so we're actually ahead of that. We're going to apply some pressure here, put these guys to a tough decision, and raise it up to 60. Small blind doesn't think too long before letting it go, and the big blind quickly follows suit. I would have been okay seeing a call or a raise from either player, but again, it's a win, so we're happy to take it. Small blind shared with me that he had king 10 and he was kind of kicking himself because he thought he played that hand wrong, but he was actually behind. It's starting to get fairly late, and I debated for a while about whether I should leave or not, but I ended up just staying till close, so we stick it out and stay in the game. This hand, we're still six-handed. We look down at pocket 3s under the gun, gonna come in for a raise of 10. The opponent to my immediate left makes it 30, and the big blind cold calls. At this point, it's $20 for me to call. I'm getting 3.5 to 1 direct pot odds, and I've also got the implied odds with the deeper stacks. Let's see if we can find another 3 on the flop. Flop comes 8-4-3 rainbow. This is the dream we were all hoping for. Big blind checks, and I check it over to the aggressor. He continues telling his story with a bet of 50, and the big blind folds. Now with $335 remaining in my stack, I feel like the best play here is to call, lead the turn, and jam the river. In the moment, I thought that in order to get my stack in, I needed to make a check raise here. Clearly that was wrong. It was just a misread for myself. After playing 7 or 8 hours, you get tired, you start making a few mistakes. This was definitely a mistake. I should always be calling here because he's only going to continue with his really good hands, and I got to allow him to catch up on a later street with the hands that he is bluffing with. He quickly folds, and we scoop in a decent sized pot, but not as big as it could have been. The very next hand, under the gun opens, the whole table calls, and we're in the big blind. We look down at pocket kings. This is the best starting hand that I've had all day. It's getting toward the end of the night. Our table's been very, very loose this last few hours. Everyone's feeling kind of good. It's a friendly game. I want to trim these players down right now. What I don't want to have happen is me raise and go 5 ways to this flop. Plus, I won the last pot without a showdown, so I think it's more likely that someone's going to want to play back at me, thinking that I'm trying to steal it, making a big squeeze here with all this dead money. I raise it up to 77. Under the gun thinks about it briefly before deciding to let it go, and the rest of the table follows suit. I show my kings just for the sake that it's a friendly game, and it's getting toward the end of the night, so we're going to be out of here soon. 2 hands later, we pick up another big hand. The straddle's on for 5, cutoff limps, and we look down at pocket 9s. We want to thin the field out a little bit, so we raise it up to 20. Big blind makes the call, straddle goes all in for 40, and the cutoff cold calls his 40. The cutoff has about 160 behind, and the big blind has me covered. The big blind's been playing some questionable hands. I'm not too worried about what the cutoff has, and I think we have the best hand at this point. I don't want to put in a big raise trying to isolate the all-in, because I'd be putting in about 25 to 30% of my stack. If the big blind calls, our hand will be vulnerable post-flop, and it's going to put us in some tough positions because we're going to have about a 1-to-1 stack-to-pot ratio. For all these reasons, I decided to ship it in. If the big blind somehow was trapping us here, then good job, but let's just get it all in. Let's try to end this night on a high note. We fade the big blind trapping us, and the cutoff folds as well. It costs us $40 here to win a pot of nearly 160.
We're a 2-to-1 favorite as we're up against ace-8 suited.
We fade and we scoop the last pot of the night. Overall, I'd call this a great session. We were card dead for most of the day. We had to play disciplined. We were patient. We didn't try to bluff into 4-way pots where we had just ace high. We tried to stay in a good mindset. I think we did that, and we made some big folds. This ended up being a winning session for us because we folded that queen 10 straight. If we called there, we would have been down for the day, and it would be a long ride home. It wasn't a killer day on the profit side, but any day you manage to walk away in the green is a win.
We were in for 400, cashed out for 585. That's a profit of $185 over the course of 7.5 hours for about $25 an hour, bringing our total bankroll to $37.50. If there's something you'd like to see or explain more thoroughly, feel free to leave a comment below. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you on the next one.